Text has a significant effect on how we view a web page, and CSS has many options for defining text styles. Font properties enable us to change the appearance of text by assigning a font family, font size, thickness, and more. In this video, we'll learn some common font properties we can use to enhance our text. So let's dive in. I've set up an HTML page containing an H1 and paragraph element with text inside, and the page is linked to a CSS file, which is where we'll be creating our font styles. First, we'll go over the font family property. Font family allows us to specify a typeface for the text in an element. The value we specify is the name of the typeface we want to use. There are two types of font family names: the name of a specific font family, such as Verdana, Arial, or Helvetica, and a generic family name like serif, sans serif, or monospace. We'll go ahead and increase the font size here so we can see these up close. Serif fonts have a finishing stroke or tapering ends at the end of some characters, and they're usually proportionately spaced. Examples of serif typefaces are Times and Georgia. Unlike serif fonts, sans serif fonts have stroke endings that are plain, without any finishing strokes or ornamentation. Examples of sans serif typefaces are Verdana or Helvetica. In a monospace font, all letters and characters have the same fixed width, and they each occupy the same amount of horizontal space. Examples of monoface typefaces are Courier and Lucida Console. Monospace is often used to render code examples. When choosing a typeface, it's important to understand that in order for the fonts we choose to be displayed in the browser, users viewing our sites will need all the fonts specified installed on their computer. But not all fonts are available on all computers. The few that are available on all systems are called web-safe fonts. So in most cases, we'll need to define other web-safe fonts as a fallback by creating a font stack. Font stacks are prioritized lists of fonts that the browser will cycle through until it finds a font that is installed on the user's system. Using font stacks with web-safe fonts ensures compatibility between browsers and operating system. Examples of web-safe fonts are Verdana, Georgia, Times New Roman, and Arial. The safest of all being the generic family names like serif, sans serif, and monospace. We can specify the fonts as a comma-separated list indicating the alternatives. So if the user does not have the first choice installed, the browser will try the alternative font from the list. In this example, if Georgia is available, it will be used when rendering. If not, then Times will be used. If both Georgia and Times are not available, the browser will then use the generic font family of serif as a last resort. It's good practice to include a generic font family as a last alternative in the font stack. If a font family is made up of more than one word, then we need to put the font inside quotes. For example, in our paragraph rule, we'll add a font family. And as you'll see, Times New Roman is 3 words, so we'll need to put Times New Roman inside the quotes. For more examples of font families, take a look at the W3Cs examples at w3.org. In an upcoming video, we'll learn how we can provide our own fonts by importing web fonts using the @fontface rule, which eliminates the need to depend on the limited number of fonts users have installed on their computers. Many fonts also have various styles within their families. For example, the font weight property specifies the weight style in the font. It sets how thick or thin the characters are displayed. The two most common values the font weight property accepts are normal and bold. Headings by default have a value of bold. In our style sheet, if we specify a font weight with a value of normal, we'll refresh, and now we can see how the heading is no longer bold. And if our paragraph rule, if we add a value of bold, now we see that the paragraph's text becomes bold. These keyword values are mapped to a numerical scale of 100 to 900 that increases values in increments of 100. 100 being the thinnest, 500 a medium value, and 900 the heaviest value. We can also use these numbers as the font weight values. For the common keyword values, the normal value is equal to a numeric value of 400, and bold is equal to 700. We can also use the lighter and bolder values, which are keywords interpreted relative to the weight inherited from the parent. For example, a weight with the value of lighter selects a font weight that is lighter than the current font weight style, and the bolder value selects a font weight that is bolder than the current font weight style. Some font families only have a few weights available or built in, and in most cases, the numeric values and the keywords bolder and lighter will not have any effect on the text. Since these values are completely dependent on the styles built into the font, they are not as commonly used as normal and bold. Next up, the font size property allows us to set the size of a font. We can size font using keywords or units. One way is with absolute size keyword values using keywords such as small, medium, or large. In our paragraph, we'll specify a font size with a value of small. And in our browser, we see what small looks like, which is pretty small. We can also use relative size keyword values like larger and smaller that are relative to the font size. The value of larger selects a size that is larger than the current font size. Here we see what that looks like. The most common way to set a font size is with length units or percentages. We thoroughly covered length units and percentages in previous videos, but I'll quickly go over ways we can use them. A common way to set a font size is with pixels. Pixels give us precise control over the text size. So if we set a font size to 20 pixels, each browser will display the size at precisely 20 pixels. Percentages are relative to the parent element's font size. So in this example, our parent element is the body of the page. So based on its default font size of 16 pixels, a font size of 100% is equal to 16 pixels. 200% is equal to 32 pixels, and a smaller percentage of, say, 75% is equal to about 12 pixels. M units are also relative to the parent font size. 1M is equal to the current font size, so again, if the body text is 16 pixels, 1M is equal to 16 pixels, 2M is then equal to 32 pixels, and so forth. If I go ahead and change the font size to our paragraph to 1.5M, the font size is now equal to 24 pixels, or 1.5 times larger than the base font size of 16 pixels. To convert pixels into M values, we divide the desired element's pixel value by the parent element's font size. So if we wanted to give the H1 an M value equal to 40 pixels, we'll need to divide the H1's desired value, 40 pixels, by the parent element's font size value, which again is the body's value of 16 pixels. So 40 divided by 16 gives us a result of 2.5 M's. So there we see our new font size for the heading specified in M's. As you can see, M's are a more flexible option and are quickly gaining popularity for setting font sizes. It's best to avoid using values that are not relative to the user's default font size. In fact, the W3C recommends that we should use M's or percentage values to maintain more scalable layouts. To learn more about these units, watch the videos on length units and the values in units badge. With the font style property, we can specify the font style for text. The font style values it accepts are normal, italic, and oblique. Normal is the default value for font style. It displays a normal font style as opposed to one that is italic or oblique, so nothing changes. The value italic causes the font to appear italic. The browser displays it by selecting the italic font from the typeface family defined. The oblique value causes the font to appear oblique. These are commonly sloped versions of the normal value. The oblique value isn't used often, mostly because a lot of typefaces do not have an oblique version. Most browsers use italic as the substitutes for obliques, and if no italic or oblique fonts are available, the browser can create a synthetic or faux style by rendering the normal face with a sloping transformation applied. With the font variant property, we can set the font variant that will be used for the text. It specifies whether or not text should be displayed in small caps font, which is a font where the lowercase letters appear as smaller versions of the uppercase letters. So for example, in our paragraph, we'll add a value of small caps for the font variant property. When we refresh the page, notice how the text is converted to uppercase letters, and the uppercase letters appear in a smaller font size than the original uppercase letters. If a small caps font is not available, browsers will simulate a small caps font by taking a normal font and replacing the lowercase letters with scaled uppercase characters. Finally, the font property is a convenient shorthand property for setting all of the properties we just learned in one declaration. So in our paragraph rule, I'll add the font property, followed by the values italic, small caps, bold, the font size value, and finally the font family. We can go ahead and move the declarations above because now they're all specified in the font property. When we refresh the page, we see what the text looks like with all the font properties applied in one declaration. When using the shorthand property, it's important to remember that the font size and font family must be specified. If they are omitted, the entire line is ignored. Also, the order of the values is important and not completely free. The font style, font variant, and font weight values, if they're used, they must be defined before the font size value. Any optional value that's omitted will be set to its initial value and not its inherited value. Finally, the font family needs to be the last value defined. So we can go ahead and remove these optional values of italic, small caps, and bold. When we refresh the page, we see how the values we removed are now set to their initial value of normal. Coming up in the next video, we'll learn how we can style text using the different text properties available to us in CSS.